We actually got the money to do the trainings from the DHS OEO Safe Harbors program. The first two trainings were specifically about commercially sexually exploited youth and the resources that we have in our community around that. And then ongoing, what we've done is we tried to identify trainings that our line of work needs. We put out surveys to try to gauge what people were looking for, and then design trainings, not to just go out and find trainings that are already out there, but really ask trainers to design trainings around the way that we do the work, okay? Now, I said this before, I just want to repeat it. Anybody who is parked over at the grocery store next door is probably not going to walk out to find their car there. So if that's where you parked, I would suggest that you move it. There's parking spots over here underneath the library, and there's several spots out in the street as well. I do also want to mention we have another training coming up on August 17th. We haven't determined which training we're going to do on the 17th, but for those of you who have signed up for the previous trainings or are signed up for this one, you will be getting email notifications when that training has been determined, and also an email notification to sign up for those trainings. So, if you haven't already signed in when you walked in and left your email, make sure you do that at some point, okay? We want to make sure that you're getting all the information. All right, in addition to that, we are videotaping this training. The idea is that eventually we will be putting this training on YouTube to make it available going forward. That also means we're mic'd up. That's part of the video. If you have questions at any point during this training, make sure you're raising your hand and you're waiting for either me or Catherine to get over to you with the microphone. Obviously, our answers are going to be mic'd up, but we want the question in the first place to be mic'd up as well. So just make sure that you raise your hand, wave it around if you're not getting our attention right away, and then before you ask the question, wait till we get out to you, okay? I'm going to start by introducing Catherine Adams. She's the assistant director at Booth Brown. She's been with Booth Brown for 14 years. She's also been training CPI for 11. Her preferred pronouns are she and her.
And this is Jim Scott. He is the program manager of Streetworks for the last 6 months. Prior to that, he spent some time at Hope Street and managed the shelter outreach program and housing programs. He also recently spent some time worked as a mental health worker in the inpatient units at HCMC Psych Ward.
Before we go any farther, we've managed to make it through the introductions without dropping an F-bomb, which is a success in most of the Streetworks trainings. However, I do want to make a disclaimer. We will be using profanity during this training. Catherine actually makes extensive use of the words fuck and bitch. And we want to warn people that that's going to be a part of this training.
Okay.
Operating the PowerPoint.
We got this. Okay, Jim, what do you see? What are your objectives today? What do you want to get out of this?
Crisis de-escalation. I'm thinking karate.
No. Nope. If you try a hands-on approach, you're doing it wrong.
No karate. Well, then I'm hoping for magical words that de-escalate a crisis.
No, there really aren't any magical words. In fact, there are probably magical words that can escalate a situation further, but certainly not de-escalate.
Well, no karate,
Nope.
no magic words. What exactly are we doing here?
Well, I mean, I think you've trained de-escalation for years. I've trained de-escalation for years. What do you think's different about this training than what we've taught in the past?
The big difference that we're kind of approaching this with is most of the trainings that we've done in the past, most of those de-escalation trainings, and many of the de-escalation trainings I'm sure many of you have already attended, have focused on the most extreme examples of crisis. Things like violence or threats of violence. Things like psychosis, suicide, something that would involve a 911 call. And those are important de-escalation trainings, but what they do is they focus people's attention on those most serious crisis situations. And we move our focus away from those situations where we actually have more of a chance to actually successfully intervene. We have more options and things like that. And because people are trained to deal with the most serious crisis situations, very often they're not ready to deal with the less serious crisis interventions in the best way. Sometimes they just don't have the skills for those less serious crisis situations. Sometimes they wait for a less serious crisis situation to become more serious before they jump in.
And if you're waiting around for somebody to get loud and start yelling during a crisis, you're kind of asking for that person to get loud and to start yelling, because otherwise they're not noticed that they're in crisis.
So let's talk about what we're actually going to get out of this training as opposed to other de-escalation trainings. We're going to start with a very youth-focused approach to how we're doing this training.
We're also going to use a trauma-informed approach to understand and respond to the crisis.
And we're going to include harm reduction in the way we do this training, both before a crisis and after a crisis. So let's start with what do I do in a situation where I've got someone yelling at me?
I think you're getting ahead of yourself a little bit, Jim. I think we should probably focus on how you would define crisis.
Define crisis, all right. How about we start with Merriam-Webster's dictionary? A difficult or dangerous situation that needs serious attention. This is the kind of definition I can get on board with. This kind of sounds like the trainings I've been doing before. Difficult or dangerous situation, serious attention. You sure we're not going to be doing karate at some point?
Quite sure, quite sure. This definition seems a little ominous to me. I'd like to use a different definition. I would like to focus on the Collins Dictionary, where they define crisis as a situation in which something or someone is affected by one or more very serious problems. This really has more of a human element to it. It also talks more about how a person in crisis is responding to something, and it's more person-centered. Speaking of being person-centered, it can be helpful to understand how a person acts and thinks when they're not in crisis. So we want to talk about baseline.
Baseline. So we're talking about when a person is pleasant, nice, sweet, kind.
Not exactly.
Baseline is calm.
No, baseline is more like normal. That everybody's normal is different.
Everybody's.
So let's take you, for example. Are you at baseline right now?
Calm, cool, collected. Little nervous about talking in front of a group of people this big, but yeah, cool as a cucumber.
Okay. Jim, I've spent a lot of hours with you recently preparing for this training. You are probably the loudest person I have ever spent time with. You can be pretty abrasive. You're also incredibly sarcastic. And you never stop moving.
That's a slight exaggeration.
It's really not. It's really not. I think I'm just the first person to probably tell you this to your face.
That hurts. That hurts. So what you're telling me is I look like a person who's about to go off at any minute?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I appreciate that. This might be the first time my baseline has ever been insulted.
Yeah. Well, it's important to realize that what your baseline is might look like someone else's crisis.
Gotcha. Well, let's talk about youth at baseline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's assume, for the purpose of this training, that I am a 17-year-old youth.
All right. What exactly does your baseline look like? I'm assuming loud?
Maybe, yeah.
All right. Of course, I've known some youth that their baseline was pretty quiet, almost silent most of the time. I've known some youth where their baseline was cooperative, but I've also known some youth where they just simply break any rule you put in front of them.
Yeah.
I've known the youth that were obnoxious. I've known the youth that were nice and sweet.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, a person's baseline could be all over the place?
Yeah. Each youth can have different baselines, and every youth has multiple baselines sometimes.
So if you're telling me that in order to understand what to do in a crisis situation, I have to understand what a person's baseline is, and I can't make any assumptions about what a person's baseline is unless I know that.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you can't assume because someone's quiet that they're sad. You can't assume that because someone's loud they're mad.
Gotcha. Okay. I would like to point out, however, that so far you've simply made crisis more complicated.
You're welcome.
But okay, I
You're
get
welcome.
you.
That was my intent. I also just want to mention that it's really important, or that it's easier to recognize those baselines when you know the client.
Yeah.
And so when you have that benefit, that's great, and that's really helpful. However, in our line of work, it's not always easy for us to already know the client. We're meeting them for the first time on the street, meeting them for the first time in a shelter, so it can be pretty challenging to determine what that baseline looks like.
All right.
I'm going to move on and focus a little bit on a little geography lesson here. So we're going to look at being in a shelter room.
All right. What's that? All right.
Okay, so
If we can get the camera to pan over to the windows. All right.
Okay. So I'm going to assume we are in a room in a shelter.
Okay.
And in fact, this is my room in the shelter because I am 17-year-old staying here.
Okay. 17-year-old staying. This is your room.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you in the room?
I am over in this corner.
Okay. And I'll be standing over here, represented by the G.
Get the fuck away from me, Jim.
Okay, Catherine, hold up. Where is that coming from?
Get the fuck away from me, bitch.
Okay, just calm down. All right. I have no idea where that's coming from, seriously.
Get the fuck away from me, bitch.
Okay, I don't get this at all. You just started yelling at me for no reason.
Is this a crisis?
Yeah, you're yelling at me. I think this is a crisis.
Okay, I'm not attacking you. I'm not threatening you. I'm yelling at you.
Yeah, but you're yelling swear words at me, or you're actually yelling. That's pretty loud, that kind of thing. I'd say this is a crisis. This looks like it could get out of hand.
Why don't you just leave the room?
Leave the room.
Probably need a door to leave the room, huh?
All right. Okay, so I walk out of the room, and you're still yelling, but if I walk out of the room, the crisis is averted?
Not necessarily. I'm still yelling, right?
Well, I suppose I could close the door.
Get the fuck away from me, bitch.
You're right, that is better, actually. Yeah, a little bit quieter. Okay, so the idea is that I have the option of just walking out of the room, and all of a sudden, this is less of a crisis.
Yeah.
All right. So maybe I go inside the room again,
Yeah.
and I just stay next to the door and can walk out whenever I want to.
Yes.
All right.
It's important that you realize you have that option right there available to you.
Okay.
So since you're in the room,
Yeah.
you've got this option. What I'm hearing you kind of talk about is safety. You know you have a safe way out of the room, right?
Right.
Okay. So if you're worried I might hurt you, you can always walk out the door.
Okay.
Get the fuck away from me, bitch.
So you're still screaming. We're still on the screaming thing?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
But I'm just going to keep reminding myself right next to the door, this makes it safer, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Are there any other staff around?
You know what? Yes, it's that part of the night where we have two staff on in the shelter. I've got Oscar right around the corner.
Does he know what's going on right now?
Well, I'm sure he can probably hear us.
Get the fuck away from me, bitch.
He can probably hear you for sure.
Can you call for help?
Yeah, if the door's open, I guess I could call for help. I mean, Oscar can hear what's going on. Should I call for help now?
I don't really think you need to right now, but I think just knowing that option is there is enough.
All right, so leave Oscar where he is. Just leave the door open so he can keep hearing what's going on.
Yeah.
All right.
If Oscar wasn't there,
Okay.
you might want to consider keeping your distance.
All right, that's actually a more serious situation. So if I'm working in the shelter alone, that makes a huge difference. Someone raise their hand.
I'm looking. Anybody got a question?
Okay, me as a staff, this would be a little concerning. I mean, if I'm alone in the shelter and I've got someone who's about to go off, isn't this could be a potentially serious situation.
Yeah. What do you do if there's no one easily available?
All right. Well, and keeping in mind that the people in this room work in different situations. I've been in situations where I've been the only staff in the middle of a crisis situation. That affects how you deal with a crisis, okay? Realizing that if you've got another person there makes a big difference. But also realizing that you don't have help coming also makes a big difference. And we want to make a point here, right here at this point in the training, to point out that you cannot de-escalate a crisis situation if you can't keep yourself safe, okay? And so when we're training in de-escalation techniques in this training, we want to make sure that if I'm the only person in this shelter and Catherine is yelling, I want to treat it one way. But if Catherine looks like she's about to attack me, this is not a point for de-escalation, all right? That's a safety situation. You're not looking at de-escalating the situation. You're looking at getting yourself to a safe place. If that means getting yourself away from Catherine, that's what you do. Now, a lot of people go, well, if you don't have the answer for that crisis situation, then who does? When we're talking about safety situations, we really want you to look at your agency, your supervisors, and your coworkers for that answer. If you work at a shelter or at a drop-in center where you could potentially be alone with the youth in a crisis situation, you need to talk to your agency about what the answer is to that situation. We can give you answers for de-escalation situations, but we can't give you answers for those kind of safety situations, other than the fact that you need to be aware of them, and you need to be bringing them back to your agency. All right? We're not going to teach you Kung Fu. We can't teach you a magical way to get yourself out of a situation where someone's attacking you. Okay? So when that's the situation, make sure you know what your agency wants you to do in that situation. And if your agency doesn't have an answer for that situation, then that's a good time to push back on your agency. Okay? So if I'm sitting in this shelter alone by myself, I should know that in this situation where Catherine could potentially attack me and I don't want to be alone with her, is the plan for me to leave the shelter? Is the plan for me to call a supervisor who's going to give me immediate aid? Is the plan for me to just call 911? Again, these are questions we can't answer, but we do need your agency to answer. All right.
Okay.
So, back in the shelter. Let's see here. Lost my place.
What
All
if we switch places?
We're switching places. All right. So, I'm over in this corner. We switching the door?
No. Get the fuck away from me, bitch.
Okay, so this is a different situation, because, So the door's behind you, and I'm in the corner.
Yep. Kind of scary.
Yeah, this is not a situation I'm a big fan of. I mean, I like the idea of I could just walk out of here, and that would affect the crisis situation. So that was kind of cool. This situation, I can't get out the door without getting closer to you. That doesn't sound like a good idea. So no, I don't like this corner idea.
That's fair, but this is a real situation that could happen where you're in this position. And so it's important to realize that a crisis isn't just because Catherine the youth is yelling. It has to do with where we're positioned in the room. It has to do with who else we have with us. It all makes a difference. If you're stuck in the corner and I'm yelling, find a way out. Figure it out.
Okay. So your point is don't back yourself into corners. You need to be aware. You need to try to keep yourself out of those kind of situations. But hold on a second here. Let's say you weren't there at first. There's an empty room. And I go in to empty the garbage, and your garbage can's in the corner. All of a sudden, I'm in the corner, and then you show up yelling and screaming, and you're get the fuck out of here's. Well, that's not my fault. I mean, there wasn't anything I could do to keep myself. I mean, I was just emptying the garbage, right?
True. Yeah, it's not your fault, but you have to be prepared to deal with this situation regardless.
All right. Well, okay, so here's the thing. I think what we're going to do is, because I really don't like that situation, that is not a fun situation to talk about. The idea of being backed in the corner by you. So how about if we switch it back to the way it was where I felt a little more comfortable. There we go. Much better. Meet you by the door.
That's awesome. Great. Just great for me. Really happy. I'm still in the corner. Were you not feeling scared when you were in the corner?
I was a little bit worried when I was in the corner.
A little worried. Guess how I feel in the corner? I'm in the corner. There's this power differential there, your staff, and you've come into my space. This is my room. I've been told that this is where I can go in the shelter. It's not like we're out in a common space. You've got me cornered in a room. Where's my exit? Right by you.
Okay. Kind of see where this training's going to go. I'm just not going to be right about anything here. So the smart move for me is to be next to the door. A good move in this situation is for you to be next to the door. That doesn't sound like enough space for me to feel safe. I mean, is there seriously, if being in this room just creates this situation that actually could escalate the crisis, I mean, what am I supposed to do? Ask you to go out of the room? Go outside?
That could definitely be a good idea. It gives me an option. It gives me the choice to choose whether I want to have this conversation here or if I want to have this conversation in a different space. You're going to empower me with that.
All right. So that's an actual option. If I felt like, we could be as safe outside as we were inside, that's an option. Okay. I mean, if I got Oscar there, he can take care of the shelter while we discuss this outside, and that could potentially make things a little bit better for you?
Yeah.
All right.
So let's move this situation to outside.
All right, so we're getting rid of the walls.
And since we're moving to outside, we can kind of focus on what this would look like as an outreach situation.
Nice, I like it. Let's talk about an outreach situation. So, no walls, we're outside, we're on the street.
So the geography is obviously changing.
Geography's changing, yep. No walls, that means I can just simply go that way if I've got a problem with you.
So can I. I can also leave.
Nice.
We're kind of taking away the rules. We are in the shelter. Your role was to kind of keep things under control. We're outside now, so that changes that dynamic. On the street, you're no longer in charge.
So it's not my job to make sure you're talking safely. I can just walk away and I don't really have to worry about whether or not you're swearing. All right. So walking away is an even better option in this situation. Hold on a second, though.
What if you have a partner with you?
I was about to say, what if you follow me and stuff like that?
I might. But outreach?
So,
do you normally do it alone?
No, I'm pretty sure if I'm out on the street, I got Oscar with me again.
Okay.
And that would make a difference about dealing with you as well.
Much safer.
Okay. Point taken. All right. So I guess I'm still kind of struggling with this here. You're basically saying that it's like you're yelling, you're screaming at me. That's not necessarily a crisis. It has all these other things to do with it.
Yep. Yeah. The point is that the geography lesson was to get us to understand that one crisis is different from another, and the differences go beyond me just swearing at you. To really be able to respond to a crisis, it's important to understand how you can affect the situation. You can't really control what I'm going to do, but if you know what you're doing, you can limit how much you escalate the situation and hopefully positively influence it.
All right. All right. So the idea is staying out of corners.
Yep.
All right. And if someone starts yelling at me,
What are your options?
if I got a doorway, walk through the doorway. If I'm out on the street, walk away. If I've got a partner present, make sure I got help nearby.
So what I'm hearing is you're being prepared for the crisis. You've thought about it ahead of time, so then in the moment you're able to make better decisions.
Got it. Got it. I understand why this is the part of the prevention piece.
Yep. And you don't just react like it's an attack for each situation. You take each situation differently, and then you can respond more appropriately.
Got it. Got it. So, what's our next? I guess we're moving on. So the next phase of this is intervention, which I suspect is where we do the karate.
There is going to be no karate.
No karate.
If there was going to be karate, I would not have worn a dress.
All right. So, what are we going to talk about?
We're going to talk about fight or flight.
All right.
So what we're going to talk about is what a crisis looks like and feels like to me, the youth. So earlier I said that I'm a 17-year-old youth.
Right. Okay. So, this whole situation, you've been yelling to start with. Let's see. You look pretty serious the entire time, furrowed brow. You haven't unclenched your fist the entire time we were talking. You've actually turned a little red and don't seem to have a lot of control over some of your movements. So, yeah, so that's kind of what that fight or flight looks like.
Yeah. If you get a little closer, my pupils are even dilated.
I'm gonna leave your pupils over there. I'm fine. Right over here, as long as you keep yelling at me.
Okay, so those are just some of the ways that a person reacts in a crisis. What Jim can't see right now is that my heart rate has increased. My body has started to move blood away from the surface of my skin, away from my digestive system. It's moved it towards my muscles, my extremities, so that I can be prepared for a dangerous situation. And then I'm ready to either run or to kick his ass.
Okay, so about that. So why would you want to kick my ass? I haven't done anything to you.
It's not logic. It's instinct. This is what people do when they sense a threat. This is normal and natural for us to go into a fight or flight when we perceive danger.
Okay, but the problem here is that there's nothing threatening you. I mean, why would you go into fight or flight if I'm not threatening you, if there's nothing around that's threatening you?
It's not about what your perception is of the situation. It's about what I'm perceiving in this situation, and I am perceiving a threat. Because when you're in this stage of fight or flight, it's not just, it could be a sense, a smell that sets this off. Maybe you're wearing a cologne that's similar to a cologne that my abuser has worn.
Okay. So physically speaking, you're getting ready to kick my ass. But I can still reason with you, right?
Maybe. Might be a little hard at this point because what I'm focused on, I've got tunnel vision. I'm perceiving everything through a lens of danger, a lens of fear. So anything you do, I could interpret as scary.
Anything I do, something as not scary as, calm down, Catherine, calm down. Okay, that's not exactly what it looked like, but okay, I get it.
That's what I saw.
So that's what you saw. Okay. All right, so be careful with hand gestures. Maybe kind of like keep my volume down. All right. All right.
Yep.
It's an interesting interpretation. All right. So.
Yeah. I think other things that are important to keep in mind with fight or flight is that, this is a chemical reaction happening in your body. That adrenaline is flowing through. So just keep that in mind. We don't have a lot of control over that. And that a typical individual that experiences fight or flight might not be an individual that's experienced trauma before, so it might take something to push them over that edge, where a lot of the youth that we work with, it doesn't take a lot to trigger that? Because a lot of them are experiencing crisis pretty regularly or almost constantly in some form of crisis, not to mention their history, and that trauma that they've experienced really puts them in this heightened state pretty often.
You mentioned trauma, and I just want to point out something. Through this entire thing, all the swear words and the exaggerated gestures that are supposed to be me, you're a little scary yourself in this situation. If I'm starting to feel a little bit of that fight or flight too. Should I be expecting the same kind of responses? I mean, just because I'm responding to a crisis, now all of a sudden I'm feeling like I'm in that crisis too?
Yeah, it's what I said before. I mean, it's natural, it's normal to go into this. But what's important is that as the professional, you're aware of this and you realize this and that you've planned ahead of time for crisis situations so that you can understand and react appropriately to what you're experiencing.
So, if I'm viewing a situation as really, really scary, that may not necessarily be because it's really, really scary so much as it's just, I'm in fight or flight too, and you look like you're going, get the fuck away from me, bitch.
Yes.
Got it.
Correct.
Okay. All right. All right. So let's get back to this trauma-informed care thing you started talking about.
Yeah. So that typical individual, as I said before, may not have experienced those crises, so they might not necessarily be in that heightened state. But for too many of our youth, fight or flight is their baseline. So we might just be triggered by that threat very quickly, and it's important to keep that in mind when we're interacting and to keep our stuff kind of low key.
Okay, so I'm trying to figure this out as a potential responder. You're basically saying that I'm walking into a situation, this person is responding to something that I may not be able to see, that may potentially not even be there, and could potentially actually be a traumatic event from years ago.
Yep. Correct.
How am I possibly going to know how to respond in a situation like that, where it's almost like I've got less information about this crisis situation than when this training first started?
Huh. Oops. Let's consider the alternative. You can walk into a crisis situation, assume you know what's going on, what you know, and what you can see, and attempt to de-escalate a person without any insight into what they are thinking or why they are acting like that. Sometimes assuming you know very little is a better approach than convincing yourself that you know what's going on and that you have all the answers. So, back to this kind of character that we started talking about earlier of assuming that I am a youth. I want to tell you a little bit about me as the 17-year-old youth. I identify as female. I have been homeless for about a year. Previously, I lived with my...
Am I supposed to be listening to this?
No, stop listening. Or should I go with "get the fuck away from me, bitch"? That be a more appropriate
Working
response?
pretty effectively, actually.
Seems to be. I'm enjoying it. So I've been homeless for about a year. Before that, I lived with my mom and other family members in an apartment, and it was pretty crowded. But my mom eventually lost her housing, so for the last year, I've been bouncing around, staying with different friends, things like that. I have eventually kind of ran out of friends to stay with, stayed in some shelters, may have gotten kicked out.
I find it hard to believe you got kicked out of a shelter.
Get the fuck away from me,
Leaving.
bitch. And once I ran out of friends and shelter really wasn't working out for me, I stayed with some not so nice guys. Had to do some things that don't really want to talk about. But eventually, I did meet a really nice guy, or at least I thought he was at first. And now he's introduced me to his friends, and I have to do some things that I don't really want to talk about.
All right. Well, I don't know any of that. All right, this is the kind of stuff that she is keeping to herself. The truth is, I've met Catherine once before this. It was a couple months ago. She was bouncing around, couch hopping. I talked to her about several resources, drop-in centers, food shelves, places where I was hoping she might be able to stop by and get connected to somebody. She wasn't too enthusiastic about working with me. She didn't seem too enthusiastic about some of my options. I even dropped the idea of a shelter back then. Didn't seem to go over very well, but I made sure, when she walked away from me, that she had my card. She must have held on to it because it's a couple months later and all of a sudden she calls me up. So I say, hey, let's meet. Now, I've been going to this de-escalation training and I figured where we meet might be an important thing. And so I picked a spot at a library that lets me have a little room and stuff like that where we'd be able to talk, kind of neutral territory, safe. This would be it.
Yeah. So what's this?
This is our room in the library. I actually chose it specifically, kind of set up the chairs because we got a door right here, all right? Still visible, we're all visible in here, so she's not feeling like she's cut off. I put the chairs equal distance from the door because I actually learned something at the de-escalation class I took. And I figure I've kind of created a spot where, you know, even if things go a little shaky, things can still be safe. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the idea.
So anybody could walk in, anybody could see us?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess it's not super private. Yeah, so people might see us talking, but, you know, yeah, still safe. I mean, you're not isolated or anything like that.
Okay.
All right. So, Catherine, saw you 2 months ago. I'm really glad that you gave me a call. So, what is it that I can help you with?
I'm not sure anymore. Maybe this isn't the best idea.
No, whoa. Not going to push anything on you. You know, if you want to leave, you can go ahead and leave. That's just fine. But why don't you tell me what's been going on with you?
Yeah, bouncing around a bit. Not really having a regular place to stay.
Yeah, where have you been staying?
Get the fuck away from me, bitch!
Whoa, again with this. All right, so what we tried to do is set up a scenario, okay? And we specifically, we want to actually have you guys do a little bit of interactive stuff at this point, okay? So what we've done is we're gonna divide the room into 2 parts. This is gonna be my side. This is Jim, the outreach worker in the library side.
And this is Catherine, the youth. My side.
All right. Drew, for the purpose of this, would you mind sitting in that row? All right. Drew, underneath your sheet is a piece of paper, and it's got a question on it. The question is, what are Jim's motivations?
Yep, and on this side, I'm going to have you move back 1 row, because it'd be more fun with a group. And under this seat on this side, we have a question that is, what are your motivations?
Mm-hmm. So we want you in this row to answer that question. What are my motivations? You have one that asks about what kind of options I have, all right? So I want this row to talk about options. Jimmy, you've got, again, motivations. Don't try to listen into the first row. You're looking for my options in this situation, and you guys just fill in with these guys, okay? Now, I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes to discuss. We're not going to give you a whole lot of time. There's going to be some obvious answers to these questions. Go ahead, put them down. But we'd like you to have 5 answers to these questions. So you might have to dig, you might have to get creative, you might even have to make some assumptions about what's going on in my head. All right, you guys, so I'm going to start coming to you. I'm going to start with the options row. Who's got the options? You got the options over there? Do you want to toss them over here? All right, who's your best speaker at this row? That's him? Yes. All right, sweet. All right, what are Jim's options? You want to read them off to me?
Yeah, we got to leave the situation.
Leave the situation.
Either call the supervisor,
okay.
Get some guidance on what to do, give the youth a little bit of time alone to cool down or evaluate what he or she wants to do.
Yeah.
Change the subject or ask, is there something about me that makes you uncomfortable?
All right. Thanks. What's your name?
Tierra Thompson.
Tierra Thompson. Thank you very much, Tierra. All right. Let's throw that up there. Row 4, I'm coming to you guys for a couple more options. All right. Row 4. How about I hold it up and you hold the microphone?
Sorry.
All right. What do you have as far, what? So, seriously? Crisis situation, paper cut.
We have refer to a different or female outreach worker. Maybe she can relate more to that individual. Let it go and move on with the conversation or change the subject. Conversation about distance between them. Maybe suggest or ask her if she wants him to move further away. Mention that he's a mandated reporter. Sometimes the young person may feel that they have to share information that they don't want to share, and just let them know that they don't have to share if they don't want to. Allow for a long time, ask youth that there's a different place that they like to meet, and remind the youth that she can leave and call him later.
Thank you, thank you. What was your name?
Shakira.
Thank you, Shakira. There you go.
Okay, let's look at my first row with options. Who wants to talk? And I will hold this. Great. Nope, it's on and ready to go.
Okay, we said leave or reason with Jim, explain her needs, not talk at all, or talk to somebody else and cry or share her emotions.
Great. Thank you.
And grab your sheet.
Okay, who wants to talk back here? Excellent. Why don't I hold the sheet for you?
Leave. Talk about what her needs are in parentheses without being real. Get real about what you've been through. Shut down. She can get angry, and she can also send mixed messages.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'm going to hit up my motivation rows now. It's all you, Drew. Oh, do you want to do it? Awesome. What's your name?
My name's Carmela.
Thanks, Carmela.
What are Jim's motivations? Safety, staying safe, to help, get more info, prevent a crisis situation, provide resources, ensure confidentiality, identify a real problem, and meet where the client is at. Okay, where she's at. Got it.
Thanks. All right, got another row of people discussing motivations. Who's taking the mic? Awesome! Thank you, Gina.
So motivations is to help make her feel validated. We want Catherine to be and feel informed. The outreach worker in question wants to do their job, get their job accomplished, and to de-escalate, get her out of fight or flight mode.
Thank you.
Oh, don't you have another row? No. Oh, you didn't have another row. Okay, who wants to talk? Excellent, thank you.
So seeking help without giving up too much information, getting her basic needs met, not knowing the resources available, thinking she has exhausted all options, human contact with someone who is able to help, getting her life back on track, safety, having a safe space, being afraid of him but wanting that trust adult relationship, trust adult youth relationship.
Great, thank you. Okay, my final group, who would like to speak? Thank you.
She said get out of the current situation, asking for help. She's trying to find stability, find out how safe Jim is, protecting herself, especially in that part where she swore at him, and then testing what Jim is made of, and is he going to run from her?
Thank you.
Did you just have 4?
Yes, we just
Okay.
ended up with 4.
Sweet. All right. Well, we should probably reconvene in our library after that. To briefly recap, I was asking some very well thought out and questions that wouldn't set you off for any reason. And then you were responding with, I believe it was, get the fuck away from me, bitch. Yeah. So, yeah. So, I mean, at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to assess the situation. We're in a safe spot. We're in a library. There's people around. It's not like we're in a secluded part of it. There's windows and glass, and people can probably hear us. People probably can already hear you. There's a door right in between us. I've got the option of leaving. I've made sure you have the option of leaving. And yeah, you're yelling at me, and I'm a little bit worried about where this is going to go. But as long as you're sitting down, I think I'm going to try to go with this. I think as long as I've got the option to go, staying is an option as well. And I think I'm going to go with that for right now.
Okay. Do you say anything?
Yeah, I think I'm going to try to... How about... you know what? I think I'm not going to go with, it seems like you're overreacting, you might want to calm down.
Probably a good plan. If you went
Okay.
with that option, I'd suggest you left the
Okay.
room quickly.
All right. So I'm already picking up on this stuff. How about, Catherine, you're safe?
Maybe if we already had an established relationship and if I felt safe around you, but telling me that right now just reminds me of how unsafe how little you know about my situation, because I'm not safe.
All right. I could try to gain some insight. I could ask you, why are you yelling?
I'm really not going to want to explain to you why I'm yelling. I don't want to talk about why I'm angry. I don't want to talk about why I'm scared. I don't want to share that with you.
Okay. All right. So that I won't ask you to justify that. I got it. All right. How about I know you must be feeling bad, but
Seriously, stop. I could hit you.
You're right. That's probably wrong. Man. Okay. How about just not saying anything at all?
That could be a good option.
Okay. So you're still yelling.
Get the fuck away from me, bitch.
Right. Okay. But you're still sitting there, decided to not go with any of my choices of conversation starters, and I'm just gonna sit and wait it out, and that's a reasonable option.
Yeah. Are you watching your nonverbals?
Non-threatening posture.
Yeah.
Eye contact. Good idea. Could be engaged. Could be.
Maybe
antagonizing.
not.
Okay. All right. So I'll just sit here and I'll be cool, calm, and I'll wait for you.
Okay. That
All right.
works.
Point though, we are in a library. There's people around, security. If you keep yelling at me, we could eventually have a security situation, right?
Yeah.
That wouldn't be a good idea.
No.
I suppose I could help by maybe intervening with the security guard, saying, "Hey, I'm an outreach worker. Catherine's yelling, but she's actually safe, and she just needs some space to calm down."
That could help. That would be a lot better than making me think I could be arrested.
Cool. All right. So maybe not tell you, "Hey, the security guard's showing up. You might want to quiet down, or you're going to get arrested." That's not an
Yeah,
option.
no.
Okay. Put that on the list of magical words that escalate a situation. All right. Okay. All right. So about how long do you keep screaming at me?
I don't know. I mean, eventually, I'll probably run out of steam.
And you'll get quiet?
Yeah, I could get quiet.
So we're saying you're quiet.
Yeah.
Folks, I did it. Crisis de-escalated. Talk about a success story. There's absolutely no way it's that easy.
Nope, it's not. They say on average that it takes a person 20 to 60 minutes after starting into that fight or flight, or after fight or flight situation ends, before they start to return to their baseline.
20 or 60. You're talking this could go on for an hour. Like after you stop yelling.
I am. And that's for your average person. That's not necessarily taking into consideration someone that's experienced crisis over and over, experienced trauma before.
But you're not yelling anymore, so crisis is over, right?
You don't actually know that the crisis is over. The yelling's over. I'm quieter, but my situation hasn't changed.
Okay, so wait a second. So you're telling me that even after it's quiet, you could still be in crisis. In fact, basically what you're saying is that you're probably still in crisis.
Yes.
Well, I mean, is this even a good time to start talking safety plan?
Maybe, maybe not. If you start talking options and I actually hear you, that could be a start. But if I'm not ready and you start pushing me, I might start yelling again.
I'm not going to start pushing you. So then, I mean, what are some options? I mean, if you don't seem to be reacting to doing a safety plan, you're still kind of in crisis. I mean, well, what do we have here? We had a good one. Shoot. I could give you time alone. I could, let's see. I mean, I don't want to leave the situation. That might piss you off. Maybe I could offer to leave the situation and leave it up to you.
Yeah, giving me options, giving me choices, letting me decide.
So like maybe offering, hey, I can give you some space. I can walk away right now, or I can stay. It's up to you. That's an option?
Yeah, that's definitely an option.
Okay, all right. Yeah, okay. That's a good place to, that sounds like a good place to start actually, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Okay, but it still doesn't feel like I get to win this one at all, you know? I mean, the whole idea behind de-escalating the crisis is get you to the point where, you know, you're not in crisis anymore, right? I
can see where you're thinking that. That's right. But we can't kid ourselves that crisis situations, that when we encounter crisis situations in our line of work, that the crisis ends when we stop yelling when we're quiet. Not quite sure.
This is amazing. We should have done it out on the street.
Yes, we could just head out there and, yeah. Train of thought gone. Okay. So when you look at de-escalation from a harm reduction standpoint, you have to face the fact that participation may end without a successful end to the youth's crisis. It may not be yelling, but that doesn't mean I'm not going back to the boyfriend at the end of the night. Even if you get me into shelter tonight, that doesn't mean I won't keep myself from doing the same thing that got me kicked out before.
So basically, I think what we're trying to say here, if I'm hearing you right, is that if we look at it from a harm reduction standpoint, if I'm really going to be thinking about helping you, and I'm really thinking about that in terms of like my approach to the crisis, the really important thing that I got to keep, not just in the back of my head, but actually in the way that I act, is this idea that if I'm really going to be helping you out, this crisis may keep going for you long after it stops affecting me, basically.
Yeah.
All right. It's actually a hard point to hear, to be totally honest with you.
I can see that. But I think something that you might be missing in that is that in this situation, the way you've treated me, the options you've given me, you've set me up to know that you're still willing to work with me, even though I've yelled at you. You're still willing to engage. Maybe not in this moment, maybe later on. And so even though I have to go back to my crisis, this might open up an opportunity where I'm comfortable coming back to you in the future.
Got you. So better than the approach about just trying to get you to stop trying to get you to stop swearing at me would be this idea of being present in the crisis, not trying to control the situation, and actually treating you with respect and patience.
Yeah.
All right. I think I'm starting to figure this out. So, all right. I think, one of the things that I've always been trained on is that idea that it's really, really important to talk to a person after a crisis situation about, let's talk about how if we're going to have a good relationship, you shouldn't be treating me disrespectfully.
Does this seem like a good time to do that?
Well, it doesn't seem like the best time to do that. No, I wouldn't say that. Not if I don't want you to yell and swear at me again.
So what else could you do?
Well, I think maybe what I'll try to do is focus on some positive aspects of it. I mean, you were really, really angry, but you did not hit me. Good thing to go with. Yeah?
I'd appreciate that.
Maybe rather than talking about what you shouldn't have done, maybe talk about some positive options, like what we can do next time.
Yeah.
All right. I think as part of this training, one of the things that we really want to drive home is this idea that when de-escalation usually gets trained, there's this idea around debriefing between the two people that participated in this thing, and this idea that we go back and talk about the crisis in a healthy way. And we're definitely not trying to dissuade you from that, but what we're trying to do is talk about that conversation being a healthy one, being a constructive one. These crisis situations can actually be teaching moments for the youth we work with, but only if they are empowering moments, And that means being careful about picking the time that you have that conversation. That might not be right after the crisis. If you're an outreach worker, that means you may never have that talk, It means picking where, If you're still in a situation where the person's feeling threatened, you're not going to be doing a lot of empowering in that situation. And so, yeah, you want to talk about respect and how we can work together again. If that's not the right place, then don't have it. And the other thing, too, is make sure you have the right person having that conversation. Yeah, I was the one involved in the crisis, but maybe I'm not the person to do that debrief session with the youth, even though it seems logical that I would be. If Catherine doesn't have a good relationship with me, then maybe we find someone who does have a better relationship with that person. So that person can make that connection, have a constructive conversation, and we're not trying to force this. If that opportunity isn't there, if I can't find the right time, if I can't find the right person, if I'm not the right person, then that conversation's not necessarily, that conversation's just not as important and could actually do some more damage.
Whoever does have that debrief session with the youth, it's important to make sure you're not shaming the youth. It's important to remember they're an expert on what they experienced in that situation. They're an expert on themselves. Ask them questions, empower them, give them that time to talk about what they experienced.
One of the best questions I ever asked the youth is, what could I have done better? And while this could be a learning experience for the youth, I'm not going to pass up opportunity if I've got someone who's actually feeling empowered and willing to talk to me and has that kind of trust. I'm not going to pass up an opportunity to find out how to do my work better. And I've usually found that best advice for how to do the work better is coming from the youth.
And as that 17-year-old youth, hearing that from him, that he wants my advice and my opinion on what he did really well and what he did really crappily, is going to make me feel awesome. But what's really important is the debriefing can't stop here. We might debrief with the youth, but we need to debrief with who maybe our fellow outreach worker was on shift. We need to debrief with any other collaborative partners that might have been present. We need to debrief with our supervisors back at our agency. During those debriefs, we need to be looking at what went well, where did you feel that you needed some additional supports, maybe other ways that you could have engaged. And the most important message I think you can take away from that point of the debrief is to make sure that you're talking about the youth in a respectful manner, because that's going to skew your perspective the next time you engage with them if you're talking about them negatively, or you're going to skew your colleagues' perspective of the youth. And that's going to affect those future interactions.
I want to make a specific point here about debriefing with your supervisors. This is an incredibly important part, okay? We talked before about how in a crisis situation where safety is the issue, this is not a de-escalation situation, all right? And that you need to be going back to your supervisor and talking about, if I'm in a safety situation, what do I do? What does my agency say that I do? What can I get from my supervisor? Who do I call in an emergency situation like that? But it's also really important to debrief these kinds of crisis situations with a supervisor as well. All right. This is where you can do some of your best learning as well. Your supervisor should be in on it so that your supervisor can help you say, okay, yeah, these are best practices in terms of crisis de-escalation, but this is also what our agency says you need to do, because those rules are important as well. All right.
Yeah.
So we are trying to come full circle. The idea was that we'd give you a youth-centered de-escalation training, that we'd use trauma-informed care to inform that approach, to use harm reduction throughout the training. I hope we've delivered that, but we wanted to make sure that we have enough time at the end of the presentation to actually give you guys a chance to ask questions. So if you have a question now, we've got the microphone and we'd be happy to come up to you and answer any questions that you have. Yeah.
So I do part-time outreach, and I also do part-time in our call center, in our tech center. So we get crisis calls. And when I was a case manager, calling parents over the phone. So how is it different when we're talking with someone over the phone, is my question.
You mean when they're going through a crisis on the other end of the phone?
Yes.
So they're in the crisis and you feel like you're coaching them through it?
Yeah, like say, like I've had a parent yell at me about policies that we have, and they just keep yelling and yelling and yelling and yelling.
That's actually a really good question. I mean, yeah, well, Catherine, you can jump in if you want to, but that's a really good example because it's probably pretty typical at the Bridge. You've got an entire call center, but it's not one that we usually necessarily deal with. You don't think of that as being necessarily a crisis. But it certainly reflects exactly what we're talking about. It's just you don't have the actual physical threat, which makes a huge difference because if it ever got to the point where this person was actually hurting you, and don't get me wrong, physical threats are physical threats, but verbal threats can be pretty painful, pretty traumatic, And if it ever got to the point where someone was talking in a way where it was to the point where, there are things a person can say to you where it's like, that's a good time to hang up the phone, And that's going to be a personal question, too. If the person gets so violent, threatening, so abusive that you can't continue that conversation safely, and I don't mean physically safely because obviously you're at the Bridge, they're in another place. But mentally, emotionally safely, if you can't do that conversation, that would be a great time to hang up the phone. Now again, they may have a protocol about that at the Bridge. Maybe they'll say, actually put that person on hold, move them over to another person. But those are your options too. And it's that idea that take a step back. I'm glad you brought it up, and that's the kind of thing you'd probably want to raise with your supervisor or other people at the Bridge. It's this idea that you can have a crisis over the phone. You don't need the actual physical threat for that to be a crisis. But the fact that you're at a phone bank with potentially other people working with you, that also gives you other options. So yeah, this person said those couple of words where it's like, yeah, I kind of go red at that point. I'm not really having a safe conversation with this person. And the option is I could hang up, the phone call's over. Or maybe the option is I put the person on hold and someone else answers the phone and sees if they can go take it a different direction.
Possibly you even, instead of just telling them you're putting them on hold, possibly you give them that option of, not feeling that you're hearing from me what you want to hear. Can I pass you on to someone else? Can I pass you on to my supervisor? Give them some options. They might feel empowered in that moment and maybe they bring it down a level.
Yeah. Yeah, you bet. Anybody else have any questions? We've got a lot of people here with a myriad of backgrounds. Everybody works in a different agency and has had crisis situations in very different contexts. So it'd be nice if anybody has anything to share. Yeah.
I work for the Department of Community Corrections, and one of the things that we're trying to do is work on de-escalation of our youth, either in our detention center or our residential treatment centers. And one of the things that we're moving towards is more sensory intervention, so like fidget toys or stress toys to try to, have a youth identify something when they're calm that makes them calm, and then have that available. So I'm wondering if that's something that outreach workers have in their bags, because I could see in this situation when you're meeting in the library, giving someone to fidget with might take their mind off, whatever the conversation or along those lines. So I'm wondering if that's something that agencies are doing.
Ray's actually nodding her head. Do you carry koosh balls around in your outreach bag?
Oh my gosh.
Your food, yeah. Ray, you have to have the microphone if you're going to be talking.
I do. Okay, so if a youth is having a crisis or not stable, there's a reason for that. So they might be hungry, or they might need dry socks or something. So I just open the bag, like, do you need anything? And then they see a granola bar, or they see, some socks, or, even toothpaste,
Yeah. Sometimes meeting that basic need. But I like the idea, and I don't think that's, at first I was like, koosh balls and outreach bags. That makes actually perfect sense. And from like our standpoint, I'm sorry, Drew, our standpoint of like, trying to be proactive in that prevention part, if we can identify things that could happen, in a crisis situation, and things where maybe if I carry this in my bag, it might be an option in that situation, I think that's a great idea. Val.
Hi, I'm Val. I'm a peer outreach worker over at the Core Drop in Apple Valley. I think I'm like the only one who does this though, but I always carry some kind of toy around, because like a lot of times when you're encountering like the youth on hand who has a kid that's causing the crisis situation to escalate further, toy is a good option, because then it just distracts the kid and puts less stress on the client on hand. So yeah,
That's awesome.
Yeah. I was about to say, that's a really good idea. Does anybody else have any examples of ways that you de-escalate in your situations where the de-escalation didn't go fantastically well?
Yeah, back there.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can change the lighting if the lighting is really bright. Sometimes if you go to a darker area, or just switch up the lights.
Yeah. That was one of the things, you wouldn't believe how many things got cut out of this training to get it to all fit in. When we were talking geography, the idea of how much that space can contribute to the situation, that idea, like Rosa brought up about just like the lighting. If you're in a darker space, that place is going to feel less safe. Now, of course, we've also encountered people where too much light like gets them amped up and stuff like that. But it's that sensitivity to the fact that there could be so many different reasons that could be causing this. And rather than making assumptions about what's going on, try to figure out what might be triggering, what might not be triggering, and if there are changes that can be made to kind of like help de-escalate the situation. All right? It may not always be your words.
And some of that can be done ahead of time, of being aware of what is the lighting in the places that you're meeting in. You might be able to control things ahead of time with that kind of prevention. And then in the moment of providing those options to youth of, throwing out the option of switching rooms, not because, you're going to acknowledge you want to change the lighting, but you're aware that maybe that's enough of, hey, there's some natural light versus some of those fantastic lights that you find in most of our buildings these days.
We had a situation with a youth at Safe House who was going through, it was unclear whether it was a mental health crisis or a physical health crisis, and requested that we offered to call the paramedics, and the youth consented that that's what they wanted. And the paramedics came, and their presence being there made the youth feel so much better, helped the youth to realize that it was a mental health, not a physical health crisis that was going on. And the paramedics just did a great job and said it's totally free for us to come out anytime, anywhere. We only charge when we take you with us. So that's it, as just something in your back pocket. Don't be afraid to call out the paramedics if that feels like that would help the situation.
Thanks, Kelly.
Looks like we've got another question.
Sweet. Wait, were both of you guys? Okay.
Just had a question. You used the scenario where Catherine was saying, get away from me. And I'm assuming that could be for a lot of reasons that person would respond that way if the staff simply walked into the room. And so I was wondering if you could talk about just some general backstory of why that youth might respond that way and how to de-escalate. I'm sure some of it has to do with previous sexual abuse or whatever. But when a staff is in that situation and all they did was walk in, those are key times where you do need to know how to de-escalate. And so I'd just like to hear a little bit about what some of those general situations are.
Backstory?
Uh-huh.
All right.
Yeah, she gave that one, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, well, and it's a funny thing about that is we had a backstory kind of have in our heads so that we could kind of like plan something around this. Catherine, if you want to jump in, I talk too much, but one of the reasons we didn't give that much of the backstory, one of the reasons we left so many gaps in that backstory, we did not want to give anybody the impression that they had an idea of why that Catherine was going off. Catherine was just mad. And we wanted to make sure that we kind of disconnect from those reasons, because while that may be a big part of why Catherine's going off, in terms of us, in terms of our response, sometimes we never get an answer. Sometimes the youth doesn't even know why they're going off. They're just going off. And now we may be able to piece together what some of the youth's triggers are, what kind of situations contribute to that crisis situation. We can sometimes piece that together after we built a history with that youth. But it's really important to never assume, no matter how much you know about this youth, even no matter how much Catherine tells you about her situation, in a crisis situation, you cannot always assume what is triggered and what's going to make it, what's going to make her calm down, what's going to make her feel safe. It's a rough situation to be in, and I understand that kind of inclination. I want to know more of this story. We've been talking about it for the past, bless you, hour and a half, and we'd like to know what the story is. But one of the big keys is to do this work, we don't get the story. We really have to do this work without the story. Now, sometimes we get it. But we really do need to be able to do this work without the story, because sometimes digging for that can sometimes get away from what really needs to happen, which is working with Catherine on, okay, let's calm these things down. You don't always know what the triggers are. Responding to what she gives you, giving her as many options, keeping yourself and then her as safe as possible, that kind of thing. You may not actually get to what was behind the story, And yes, story was that Catherine was the victim of commercial sexual exploitation. And anybody who took the previous 2 trainings probably should have recognized some of those signs. Right on. Those of you who did not take those first 2 trainings, those will be soon available on the Streetworks website. So you'll be better able to pick up on those signs. But yeah, we were a little ham-fisted in dropping clues and stuff like that. But we were pretty deliberate about not giving you the whole story on purpose.